The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and old leather. I sat across from Mr. Sterling, watching him flip through my file like it was yesterday's newspaper. He smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You're exceptional, Elise," he said. "Easily one of our finest attorneys." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. 7 years of blood, sweat, and late nights finally paying off. But then he closed the folder and leaned back. "Unfortunately, our firm has a tradition. Harvard credentials carry weight with our clients. You understand." The words hit me like cold water. I sat frozen, watching his mouth move, but barely hearing the rest. Something about maintaining standards and client expectations. He stood up, smoothing his tie. I stayed seated, my legs suddenly too heavy to move. That's when I understood. I'd been chasing a carrot on a stick that was never meant for me. The partnership I'd earned was just a fantasy they'd let me believe. My throat tightened. I forced myself to stand, shake his hand, and walk out with my head up. But inside, something had shifted. Something dangerous and sharp. 6 months before that meeting, Mr. Sterling had called me into his office after I won the Baxter Industries case. He'd poured 2 glasses of bourbon and raised one to me. "Keep this up, Elise, and partner is yours by year's end. That's a promise." I remember driving home that night with tears streaming down my face. Happy tears, relief tears. 7 years of 16-hour days, 73 cases won, vacations canceled, weekends sacrificed. It had all meant something. I'd called my mom, and she'd cried too. "My baby, a partner at Sterling & Associates," she'd whispered. Now, sitting in my car in the parking garage, I replayed that conversation in my head. The same man who'd promised me everything couldn't even look me in the eye today. Instead, he'd given my partnership to Mason. Golden Boy Mason, who'd graduated from Harvard 3 years ago and still needed me to fix his briefs. Mason, who'd forgotten to file a motion on time last month, and I'd stayed until midnight covering for him. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Mason appeared at my desk an hour later, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. He leaned against my cubicle wall with that casual confidence only privilege can buy. "Hey, tough break in there," he said, patting my shoulder. "But you know how it is. Maybe next time, right?" I looked up at him, this boy in a man's suit, and smiled. A real smile, because I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Congratulations, Mason. You've earned it," I lied smoothly. Inside, rage burned so hot I thought I might explode. This was the same person I'd mentored for 18 months. The one whose mistakes I'd corrected before the partners noticed. The one who'd once asked me what res judicata meant during a client meeting. Now he wore my title like a borrowed coat, acting like he'd climbed the mountain himself. "Let me know if you need anything," he said, already walking away. I watched him go, my smile never faltering. But my mind was already working, calculating, planning. That evening, everyone else left by 6. I stayed, sitting in my small office as the sun disappeared behind the downtown buildings. My framed certificates looked different now. Hollow decorations on a wall that didn't matter. I'd poured coffee earlier and accidentally knocked the cup over. The brown liquid spread across my desk, seeping into papers, forming a dark stain on the wood. I just watched it drip onto the floor, one slow drop at a time. Somehow, it felt poetic. 7 years of my life, bleeding out onto expensive carpet. That's when it clicked into place, the realization I'd been avoiding. I wasn't passed over because I wasn't good enough. I was passed over because I was too good, and that made them uncomfortable. I'd won cases they couldn't. I'd brought in clients they'd never have landed. And instead of celebrating that, they'd punished me for it. I cleaned up the coffee with paper towels, each wipe deliberate and slow. By the time I left, it was dark outside. But something inside me was finally perfectly clear. Here's what Mr. Sterling and his Harvard boys always forgot. I graduated top of my class from State University. Not because it was easy, but because I had to be twice as good to get half the recognition. I clerked for Judge Patricia Reeves, one of the toughest federal judges in the circuit. I'd won $1 billion settlement last year. Single-handedly negotiated it while Mason was on vacation in the Hamptons. I wasn't overlooked because I lacked talent or credentials. I was overlooked because I made them feel replaceable. And powerful men hate that feeling. So I made a decision that night, standing in my empty office with the city lights glittering below. If they wanted me small and invisible, I'd become unforgettable instead. If they wanted to play games with my career, I'd change the rules entirely. I'd spent 7 years building their empire. Now I'd build my own. But first, I needed to watch theirs crumble. Not out of spite, though that was there too, but because corrupt systems don't fix themselves. They needed to fall. And I was the only one who knew where the cracks were. For 2 weeks, I did something I'd never done before. I watched and listened. I smiled through morning meetings. I congratulated Mason over lunch. I even helped him prepare for a deposition, just like always. But everything was different now. I wasn't the loyal soldier anymore. I was a spy in enemy territory. And what I discovered made my stomach turn. There were whispers about billing irregularities, hours inflated on client invoices, charges for work never performed. I overheard Sterling mention adjusted retainer calculations during a closed-door meeting. One of the paralegals mentioned missing funds from a client trust account, then quickly changed the subject when she saw me listening. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The expensive dinners charged to clients who never attended. The private jet expenses buried in legal fees. The consulting payments to a company I'd never heard of. I'd been so focused on doing good work that I'd never noticed the rot underneath. Now I couldn't unsee it, so I started documenting everything. Every inconsistency, every whispered conversation, every suspicious invoice. They'd taught me to be thorough. Time to use those skills against them. On my computer, I created a folder labeled Contract Drafts, boring enough that nobody would look twice. But inside, I built something else entirely. I called it Evidence. Every night after everyone left, I stayed late copying files, screenshots of billing records, emails about client charges, invoices that didn't match the work performed, PDFs of bank transfers I wasn't supposed to see. By the end of the first week, I had a pattern. Sterling had been moving money from client trust accounts to a shell company called Prestige Consulting, LLC. Small amounts at first, then larger. Over 3 years, it totaled nearly $2 million. My hands shook as I organized the files. This wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to watch his face when he realized I knew. But I'd learned patience from 7 years of being overlooked. Anger is loud and quick. Strategy is quiet and devastating, so I kept collecting evidence, each new file another nail in their coffin. I backed everything up on 3 different drives and uploaded copies to a secure cloud storage. If they were going to destroy my future, I'd make sure they went down with it. Twice, I almost told Sterling what I knew. Once in the elevator, once in the hallway outside his office. I imagined his face going pale, his confident smile cracking like cheap paint. But then something stopped me. I realized that confrontation gives people time to prepare, to cover tracks, to spin stories. Silence, though, silence makes people nervous. It makes them wonder what you know and what you're planning. So instead, I smiled. I worked harder than ever, stayed later, took on extra cases. I acted like the rejection hadn't broken me, like I was still the loyal employee grinding for scraps. And I watched them relax. Sterling started treating me like furniture again. There, but not worth noticing. Mason stopped his fake sympathy routine and went back to asking me for help. They thought I'd accepted my place. They thought I was harmless. That was exactly what I needed them to think. Because the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. And I'd been underestimated my entire career. Time to show them what a mistake that was. The office culture shifted in subtle ways. Paralegals started giving me sympathetic looks. The secretaries whispered when I walked past. I'd hear fragments of conversations in the break room. Elise is probably leaving soon, right? She's too good for this place anyway. I'd quit too after what they did. It was strange, being talked about like I was already gone. But I noticed something interesting. People were rooting for me. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who'd watched Harvard boys get promoted while they did the real work. They saw themselves in my story. One of the junior associates, a woman named Kira, slipped me a note. "Whatever you're planning, I hope you destroy them." I smiled and tucked it into my bag. Even within Sterling's empire, there were cracks. People were tired of the nepotism, the elitism, the quiet corruption they couldn't name but could feel. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough because they didn't have the right name, or the right school, or the right connections. That made the weight easier to carry. They threw me a farewell lunch 3 weeks later. Store-bought sheet cake, lukewarm pasta from the Italian place down the street, plastic cups of cheap wine. Mason stood up and made a speech about how I'd always be part of the Sterling family. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Family doesn't stab you in the back and then serve you cake. Sterling himself showed up for 10 minutes, shook my hand, and said something about keeping in touch. His hand trembled slightly when he poured his wine. I noticed that. Guilt, maybe, or fear, some animal instinct warning him that something was wrong. I accepted their hollow words and fake smiles with grace. I even gave a little speech thanking them for the opportunity and wishing everyone success. But as I packed up my desk that afternoon, loading 7 years of my life into cardboard boxes, I felt nothing but cold determination. They thought this was an ending. They thought I was leaving quietly, defeated. They had no idea this was just the beginning. The real story was about to start, and by the time they realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. My first stop was the 42nd floor of Riverside Tower, headquarters of Baxter Industries, one of Sterling's biggest clients. I'd personally saved them $14 million in a breach of contract suit last year, working 18-hour days for 3 months straight. The CFO, Mr. Donovan, welcomed me into his glass-walled office with genuine warmth. "Elise, what brings you here?" I sat down and slid a folder across his desk. "I need to show you something about your legal billing." His smile faded as he opened it. Inside were side-by-side comparisons. Hours Sterling claimed to have worked versus the actual work performed. Charges for research that was never done. Meetings that never happened. His face changed from confusion to shock to anger in the space of 30 seconds. "This can't be right," he muttered, flipping through pages. "It is," I said quietly, "and it's been going on for years." He looked up at me, and I saw the moment he understood. "What do you need from me?" "An audit," I said. "A complete review of every invoice Sterling has sent you for the past 3 years. He reached for his phone immediately. That was the first domino. I walked out of that building knowing there was no turning back now. Within a week, word spread through the business community like fire through dry grass. I visited 6 more clients, each time showing them the same evidence, asking them the same question. "When was the last time you actually reviewed your legal bills?" By day 8, Sterling & Associates was facing audit requests from 9 major clients. Their accounting department went into panic mode. Partners started having emergency meetings behind closed doors. I got a phone call from Sterling himself. His voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Elise?" I was sitting in a coffee shop across from the office, watching people rush past the windows. I took a sip of my latte before answering. "I'm cleaning up your mess, Mr. Sterling. Someone had to." "You're destroying this firm." "No," I interrupted calmly. "You destroyed it when you decided stealing from clients was acceptable. I'm just making sure everyone knows." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the satisfaction of finally fighting back. 3 minutes later, Mason tried calling. Then Sterling again, then the managing partner. I let every call go to voicemail and ordered another coffee. Let them panic. They'd earned it. The firm's internal communications exploded. I heard about it from Kira, who was still on the inside. Partners were sending frantic emails at 2 in the morning. There were shouting matches in the hallways, fingers pointing in every direction. Everyone trying to figure out who knew what and when. Mason tried calling me 5 times in one day. I watched his name flash on my screen and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The same person who'd patted my shoulder and said, "Tough break," was now drowning in consequences. Sterling called an all-hands meeting to address the misunderstandings with clients. According to Kira, he blamed the billing department, claimed it was administrative errors, swore the firm would make everything right. But clients weren't buying it. 3 of them terminated their contracts immediately. 2 more put Sterling on probation, demanding monthly audits. The firm's reputation, built over 30 years, was crumbling in real time, and I was just getting started. Because the billing fraud was only part of the story. The shell company, the missing trust funds, that evidence was still sitting in my encrypted files, waiting for the right moment. I'd learned patience, and patience, it turns out, is the most devastating weapon. It took 12 days for the media to pick up the story. The Boston Herald ran it first. Prestigious law firm faces client fraud allegations. By evening, it was everywhere. Legal blogs, business news, even the local TV stations. I sat in a cafe across the street from the courthouse, watching the morning news on my phone. There was Sterling on the screen, walking into a building surrounded by reporters. His face was pale, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. They were asking about the trust account discrepancies, the shell company, the millions in questionable transfers. My evidence had found its way to a reporter. Anonymously, of course. I wasn't ready to be the face of this story yet. That would come later. For now, I was content to watch from the shadows as everything they'd built came apart. A text from Kira lit up my phone. Partners are in emergency session. 3 already talking about stepping down. I smiled and ordered another coffee. Outside, people rushed past on their way to work, completely unaware that a 30-year-old institution was imploding just a few blocks away. But I knew, and that was enough. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, 3 senior partners resigned. 2 were suspended pending investigation. The firm froze all new client intake. Sterling himself stepped down as managing partner, though he tried to spin it as temporary. Mason posted something on LinkedIn about pursuing new opportunities, and excited for the next chapter. I almost commented, "Try honesty next time." But I didn't. He wasn't worth the energy. The Harvard Golden Boy was scrambling now, his network suddenly full of closed doors. Funny how quickly privilege evaporates when the spotlight hits. The firm's best associates were jumping ship. Kira got an offer from a competitor and took it immediately. Half the support staff quit within a month. Sterling and Associates, once a powerhouse, was bleeding talent and reputation. I watched it all unfold from a distance, documenting everything. Because this wasn't just about revenge, though that was satisfying. This was about accountability. This was about showing everyone that elite institutions aren't untouchable. That corruption has consequences, even when it wears expensive suits and Ivy League rings. And I was living proof that you don't need Harvard on your resume to take down an empire. You just need to be smarter, more patient, and willing to stand when everyone else bows. In the middle of the chaos, I got an unexpected phone call. Mr. Donovan, the Baxter Industries CFO, wanted to meet. We sat in his corner office with its view of the harbor. "We're leaving Sterling," he said bluntly. "Their replacement firm is expensive and doesn't know our business. I want you to run our legal department. Full benefits, equity options, salary that'll make Sterling sick." It was a dream offer. Security, prestige, respect, everything I'd been denied. But I heard myself say, "I appreciate it, but I can't." He looked surprised. "Why not?" Because I wasn't done yet. Because accepting someone else's empire wasn't enough anymore. Because I'd discovered something in the past month. I didn't want to fit into their world. I wanted to build my own. "I have other plans," I said. He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You're starting your own firm?" It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I admitted. "I am." He stood and extended his hand. "Then Baxter Industries will be your first client. Send me your proposal." I walked out of that meeting feeling 10 feet tall. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't asking permission. I was taking what was mine. I spent the next 8 weeks building something from scratch. No marble floors or mahogany desks, no pretentious oil paintings or leather-bound books nobody actually read. Just substance, skill, and a promise. Absolute transparency. I called it Dalton Legal Group. My middle name, my mother's maiden name, my grandmother's legacy. The logo was simple, a compass pointing true north. Our specialty? Corporate law with complete billing transparency. Itemized invoices down to the minute. Client portals where they could track every expense in real time. Everything Sterling wasn't. I rented a modest office space downtown. Exposed brick, big windows, desks from IKEA. I hired 3 associates who'd been passed over at big firms despite brilliant minds. I brought in a paralegal who'd quit Sterling the day after I left. We were small, hungry, and laser-focused. No Harvard degrees required. Just talent, integrity, and a willingness to work harder than everyone else. Word spread fast. The lawyer who'd taken down Sterling and Associates was building something new. Clients who'd been burned started calling, and I took meetings with every single one, no matter how small the case, because I remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. I'd never do that to anyone else. Right before our official launch, I received an anonymous tip, a USB drive in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was the smoking gun. Internal Sterling emails showing they'd tried to pin the entire embezzlement scheme on a junior associate named Tobias, a kid fresh out of law school who'd had nothing to do with it. They were setting him up as the fall guy, protecting the real criminals. My hands shook as I read through the files. This wasn't just corruption, it was evil. So I did what I'd learned to do best. I sent everything to the press. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence showing Sterling and two other senior partners had orchestrated the fraud and were now destroying an innocent career to save themselves. The Boston Herald ran it the next morning. By noon, it was national news. Cable networks were calling it one of the biggest legal scandals in decades. That evening, I watched Sterling on TV, pale, sweating, standing behind a podium with lawyers flanking him. He denied everything, of course. But his eyes told a different story. He knew it was over, and so did everyone else. Sometimes justice isn't immediate, but when it comes, it's beautiful. Mason showed up at my new office unannounced, pushing past our receptionist. He looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes. "You ruined us," he said, voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed everything." I looked up from my desk where I'd been reviewing a contract for a new client. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two people who'd worked in the same office for years but lived in completely different worlds. "No, Mason," I said quietly. "I didn't ruin anything. You did. Sterling did." Every partner who looked the other way while clients were being robbed, they did this. "You could have come to us privately. Would you have listened?" I asked. "Would Sterling have fixed it? Or would I have been fired, blacklisted, and forgotten?" He didn't answer because we both knew the truth. "I won't apologize for telling the truth," I continued. "That's the difference between us. You wanted success handed to you. I earned mine." He stood there for another moment, mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something cutting, but nothing came out. Finally, he turned and left. The door clicked shut behind him. That soft sound felt like punctuation on a chapter I'd finally closed. The Massachusetts Bar Association acted swiftly. After a 2-month investigation, they revoked Sterling's license to practice law. 2 other senior partners faced the same fate. The firm officially dissolved, assets liquidated to pay back defrauded clients. Employees scattered to other firms, resumes suddenly listing Sterling and Associates as a cautionary tale instead of a badge of honor. The office building was emptied, the nameplate removed from the lobby. 30 years of history, gone. The same week, Dalton Legal Group signed 3 of Sterling's former clients, major accounts that brought credibility and steady revenue. One of them specifically told me, "We should have hired you years ago." I worked 16-hour days those first months, building processes, training staff, making sure every invoice was perfect. Because I knew people were watching, waiting for me to fail, to prove I wasn't worthy after all. But I didn't fail. I thrived. By our 6th month, we'd brought in 12 clients and hired 4 more associates. By the end of year 1, we'd outgrown our office. It wasn't just success. It was proof that you don't need the right school or the right connections. You just need to be undeniable. My mom called me that night, voice thick with emotion. "Baby, I saw the article about your firm in the paper," she said. "You did it. You actually did it." I thought about the coat I'd bought her 2 years ago when I'd thought partnership was coming. She'd hung it in her closet with the tag still on, too expensive to wear, waiting for a special occasion. "Mom," I said, "wear the coat, wear it tomorrow, wear it everywhere. This is the special occasion." She laughed through tears. "I'm so proud of you, Elise. Not because you won, because you fought." That hit me harder than anything else. Because she was right. The victory wasn't just about the firm or the money or watching Sterling fall. It was about refusing to accept what they'd decided I was worth. It was about standing up when staying down would have been easier. It was about believing in myself when nobody else did. After we hung up, I sat in my office alone, city lights twinkling outside. I thought about 17-year-old me, working 2 jobs to pay for community college, dreaming about being a lawyer someday. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her, "It's going to be hard, but you're going to make it, and it's going to be better than you ever imagined." 6 months after Sterling and Associates dissolved, I got a call from a recruiter. The successor firm to Sterling. They're restructuring under new leadership. They want to talk to you about a partnership position. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, "Set up the meeting," because I needed to see it for myself. We met in the same building, same floor, same conference room where Sterling had crushed my dreams. Different faces, same expensive furniture. The new managing partner, a woman named Victoria who'd come from a firm in New York, gave me a polished pitch. New ethics committee, transparent billing, fresh start. "We need someone with your reputation," she said. "Your integrity. We're offering a full partnership, profit-sharing corner office. Name your salary." It was everything I'd wanted 2 years ago. Everything I'd bled for. But sitting there, looking at these new faces trying to resurrect a corrupt institution with a fresh coat of paint, I felt nothing but clarity. "You're missing the point," I said, standing. "I don't work for people anymore. I build things, and I'm not interested in saving your sinking ship." I walked out without looking back. And it felt perfect. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. As I rode the elevator down, I couldn't stop smiling. Victoria had looked genuinely shocked when I'd declined. She'd probably never had someone turn down that much money, that much prestige. But she didn't understand what I'd learned over the past year. Freedom is worth more than any salary. Building something that's yours is worth more than borrowing someone else's success. Walking through that building one last time, I saw ghosts everywhere. The desk where I'd worked until midnight. The conference room where I'd won impossible cases. The hallway where Mason had patted my shoulder with fake sympathy. They were just rooms now. Just spaces that used to mean something. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "Did you really just turn down Sterling's successor firm?" "Yeah," I typed back, "because I already have something better." 3 dots appeared, then, "You're my hero." I laughed and headed toward the subway. Tomorrow, we had a new client meeting, a startup that couldn't afford Sterling's rates, but trusted us because we'd never lie to them. That felt more valuable than any corner office. 8 months later, Dalton Legal Group moved into new downtown offices. Nothing pretentious, just clean lines, natural light, and a team that actually liked coming to work. We hung a plaque by the entrance. Dalton Legal Group, truth always wins. The grand opening was small. No champagne fountains or celebrity clients, just the people who'd believed in us from the start. Mr. Donovan from Baxter Industries brought his whole executive team. Former Sterling associates who'd joined us stood around talking shop. Kira brought cupcakes. My mom wore the coat finally. I stood in the main conference room watching everyone mingle and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of knowing you'd fought for something that mattered. A reporter from the Herald showed up, the same one who'd broken the Sterling story. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Watching your firm grow while Sterling's legacy dies." I thought about that. "It's not about them anymore," I said honestly. "It never really was. This is about building something better, something that proves you don't need corruption to succeed. You just need courage." She smiled. "That's a good story." "It's a true story," I corrected. And that made all the difference. A year later, a law student interviewed me for her thesis on ethics in corporate law. She asked the question everyone always asks. How did you do it? How did you go from betrayal to building your own firm? I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city skyline. So much had changed. Sterling was a case study now, a warning in legal ethics courses. Mason was working at a small firm in Connecticut, his golden reputation tarnished permanently. Mr. Sterling faced criminal charges that would likely send him to prison. And me? I had a team of 20 lawyers, 50 clients, and a reputation for integrity that brought in business every day. They said I wasn't Harvard material, I told her. They said I didn't have the right pedigree, the right connections. They treated my 7 years of work like it didn't matter. I paused, remembering that conference room, That awful smile, that moment when everything changed. Turns out I didn't need to be Harvard material. I just had to be better. Not louder or more connected, just better at the work, better at the ethics, better at seeing people as humans instead of checkboxes. She scribbled notes, nodding. So your advice for lawyers facing discrimination? I smiled. Document everything, trust yourself, and remember, the people who underestimate you are handing you power. Use it wisely. She left, and I got back to work, because that's what you do when you build something real. You keep building, every single day. No looking back.